Jessica Coody here with Big Ten and ESPN volleyball analyst Emily Ehman, the best in the game. Well, here we are, another Final Four that Nebraska's in. How about that?
I mean, it's no surprise. You know, this is a team that has made so many, 8 in the past 10 years. It's not surprising to see them here again. This is consistent, and it's the expectation for this program. They're supposed to make Final Fours.
I want to dive into this matchup, but before we do, we saw unprecedented coverage of this tournament this year. You were a part of it on ESPN. How special is it just to see, again, the way the sport continues to grow and the amount of people that could watch this NCAA tournament? I
mean, we keep thinking that the ceiling has been set and cracked, and it just keeps getting higher and higher, which I think is the most exciting part. The viewership, I think, is something that, if you don't have context of how all of that works, 100% year-over-year turnover, that you're doubling viewership in a year, and that is something that isn't happening in any other sport, which I think speaks volumes to how well volleyball is doing and how well it's going to continue to grow.
And I know it was chalk what got here to the Final Four, but we saw there's a lot of parity. How exciting is that just to see, again, the talent that's on this sport on this stage?
Yeah, I think no one expected it to be chalk this year because of all the parity we've seen, all the upsets we saw during the regular season. So it was a bit surprising that we haven't seen any upsets from the Sweet 16 on. But I think it's made for a really fun Final Four because headed into this, it really feels like these games are going to be competitive. You know, in years past, it's been okay, maybe one of the games might not be competitive. You expect a blowout, but for the two matches that are happening on Thursday, it really feels like we're going to get really good matches. And I think everyone's excited for that because these four teams are so good.
Well, let's go back to Sunday. How impressive was what Nebraska did to Wisconsin for the third time this year?
I mean, it is so difficult to beat a team once in a year, let alone twice, but 3 times and then added onto that, sweeping them in every single time. And, that's not a Wisconsin team that is easy to take down. I think what I really saw from Nebraska was just that composure. And even from the first matchup that they had this season, I think, headed in to the field house like they did and just completely dominating and continuing to do that throughout the season was so impressive. And the defense on Sunday, that was one of the most fun matches that I think we've seen throughout the tournament, just because, I love defensive matches. That's, what gets me going. And what we saw in the backcourt, not just from Lexi Rodriguez, but everyone back there, it was so impressive. It was so much fun to watch. And I think if you somehow haven't been paying attention to Husker volleyball all year, it was very clear that they're fun to watch because of that.
How frustrating does that make it for opposing teams when they are doing what they're doing defensively?
It is so frustrating when you're going up against a defense like that where you think you're hitting good shots and all of a sudden someone comes scooping in to pick it up. It is so frustrating as an attacker because you don't have any more options. And honestly, what that does is it forces attackers to hit options and hit things that they don't want to hit. And then you see errors start piling up, especially when Nebraska's block is, going off like it did, and the backcourt defense. It just really becomes frustrating and you see the errors pile up. But that's what Nebraska does. They just force opponents to get in uncomfortable situations.
You put out a tweet or a post on X last week about Lexi Rodriguez and the best player in the country. First of all, why don't liberos win national awards, and what do we got to do to change it?
I think it's difficult for any through-rotation player to win a national award. For example, it's difficult for middles to get that award as well. When you're only playing in half of the game and your responsibilities are a lot less than some of these attackers. A player like Olivia Babcock, she has to serve, defend, hit, everything. And you look at a player like Lexi Rodriguez, she's really just passing and defending. Obviously, there's a lot more that goes into that, but that's kind of what you see on paper. To me, I think she's the best player because she's not only one of the best, well, she is the best libero in the country, in my opinion, but I think the numbers that she puts up are very special this year. I think we've seen players from year to year put up similar numbers to an Olivia Babcock, but what Lexi has done now in her 4th season, I think really sets her apart as, one of the best liberos to ever come through the college game.
Well, Bergen Riley, the setter again this year, now in year 2 with the Huskers. What can you say about just the way she spreads it around and manages this offense?
I think she's managing it a lot better than from what we saw last season. This offense is the most balanced in the country. It really helps Nebraska that they can have different players go off on any given night. They're lucky to have a player like Harper Murray on the outside who can continue to handle out of system sets, or like we saw in the regional semis and regional finals, go off like she did. It's huge to have that. But to know that they have options all around. It doesn't have to be Harper. It can be Merritt Beeson on the right side, or Landfair has really shown a lot of promise. And of course, Andy Jackson's very consistent night in and night out. That helps Bergen Riley a lot, but she's also managing it really well. With how good the pass is for Nebraska, it's great that she has all options, but then you have to be able to distribute, get the ball in the right location, and she's just improved immensely in that consistency of getting her attackers in the right spot.
You covered this team a year ago. They got to the national finals match. Now this is a team that has the experience. it's 2 different seasons, but how has this team improved from what they did a year ago to where they are now?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, you can look at how they play and those just minor improvements because they are the same people. I think in general, they've just gotten a lot more consistent across the board, whether that's passing more consistently. That was the biggest thing why they lost that national championship against Texas and got blown out because of serving. When you get aced that many times in a match, a lot of that comes down to focus and composure. That was the number one thing that Nebraska said we needed to, get on track for this season. And now they're the best passing team in the country. They've been aced the least amount of times of any team in the country. So they clearly made that change. But I think for these players, you're 1 year older, you're 1 year wiser. We're seeing that in the play of, players like Harper Murray, like Andy Jackson, Bergen Riley, who came in as a freshman and were kind of wide-eyed coming into a Final Four. I think people also don't really understand behind the scenes in a Final Four, there's so much pageantry that goes on. Like today on Wednesday, they're going through a car wash of media all day, and it's kind of scary as a freshman coming in, and you don't know what to expect, you don't know how to handle it. Nebraska's had an advantage because they did it last year, and all of these players have been through that.
All right, well, I want to get your thoughts on both matchups. Let's start with the first match before Nebraska, Pitt-Louisville. What are you looking for in that one? What are going to be the keys in that one?
It's going to be a slugfest. I think that's the most exciting thing. This is the third matchup that we're seeing this season. Pitt won in 5 the first time, and then they won in 4 the second time. Both are very different matches. Both teams had different game plans, and from what I'm hearing from both coaches, they've actually just completely scrapped the scout from the past 2 matchups and are just scouting new because the teams are different. I think one focus for Louisville specifically is to keep balance in their offense. Don't get too heavy on the outside. We see that from time to time. But the win against Stanford that Louisville had, it was because a player like Sophie Maldonado-Diaz went off in that matchup, and that was really the X factor. So having that third attacker go off is going to be huge for Louisville. For Pitt, it's going to be continuing to keep that balance, but you also need Olivia Babcock, who's one of the best players in the country to go off, and Tori Stafford, but they've been doing it all year long. So can those 2 players go off, and then also can they get some production from Valeria Vasquez-Gomez and keep the service pressure on?
All right, well, how about Nebraska-Penn State round 2? Obviously, the Nittany Lions took round 1, but how is this matchup going to be different here on this stage?
Yeah, the first time these teams matched up, I thought Nebraska did a phenomenal job following the game plan of shutting down the left sides. They were amazing at that. Both Jess Merzick and Cameron Hanna hit under 100. But then you have Caroline Jervish just going off, which was very unexpected for a player that hadn't done that all year. So I think it's the same game plan. You got to manage the lefts. And if you can do that, if another player is going off, then maybe try to contain them. But I think this time around, Nebraska's at an advantage because I think, again, Penn State's never been to a Final Four. Really, the only players that have are Jervicius and Mendelson, who came from Nebraska. So there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes. I think for Nebraska coming into this one, managing the lefts is big. On Penn State's side, I think it's just managing the moment. I think coming into the match similar to how they did in the first time around, feeling like the aggressors from the beginning, that's going to be big. But the biggest thing for the Nittany Lions is, handling the moment of a Final Four and not kind of folding in that sense and getting too nervous.
How iconic is it, though, Penn State, Nebraska, to get to the national title match?
Oh, it's amazing. There's 12 national titles between the 2 teams, 7 on Penn State's side and 5 on Nebraska's side. 2 of the most historic programs of all time, and just the success they've had really builds into this rivalry that has been created over the last few decades. And it's so much fun having something like this where it's not only an interconference matchup, but it's a massive rivalry for both of these teams.
All right, last thing in non-volleyball, because I saw you at the football game, the last one, yeah. Wisconsin and Nebraska met up in the regular season. You were at the Wisconsin-Nebraska football game. How about the Huskers getting back to a bowl game? Yeah. How did you like the atmosphere of Memorial Stadium?
I went to my first game not doing an interview, anything like. I just went as a fan, and it was literally so much fun. I thought, it doesn't compare to 92,000, of course. I stepped in, I remember being like, who put a football game in the volleyball stadium? What are we doing? But honestly, the vibe in that stadium is incredible, and I think there's no wonder why people come from all over to experience it, because it's truly one of a kind.
It's Husker Nation for you, right? In all sports?
In all sports. They are some of the best fans in the country, and they definitely let you know that.
Great stuff. Appreciate your time, as always.
Thank you.